Barkhurst. I served on the Orlek from 1969 through 1970. We were home ported in Japan at the time, and shortly after we got back to San Diego, I got out of the Navy. We're in the wardroom, and I was looking at the dining room table, and it runs port and starboard. In my day, it ran forward and aft, and the captain sat at the head of the table, and to his right sat the XO, and to his right the next senior watch officer, and the department head sat up close to the captain, usually the weapons department on his left, and the supply officer was always at the far table, so the captain could look at him all the time. Was the tradition. If he didn't like the meal, it was the supply officer's fault, so he could tell him. And of course the supply officer was here near the serving window, and the captain wanted something, he could tell the supply officer he could stick his head in the window or talk to the mess cook. Okay, another point that I noticed in the wardroom that's different from when I was aboard in 68 and 69 is that we had a movie projector over here that had an old three reel projector, 16 millimeter I guess it was, but it would drop into a little holding container, a cabinet, and to set it up you had to pull the projector out and set it up on the stand. And we usually had 1 or 2 movies aboard the ship, and if the captain wanted to see a movie, then he'd call back to officer's country for the junior officer not on watch. And so that was part of the routine. Part of your collateral duties is to come up here to set up the projector and show the movies for the captain. But if he had a whim, then that was it. We had to come up and do it. Well, when I first got aboard the Orlek, the only bunk available was up here, and it's very difficult to get into. You have to drop it down and then put it up every day, and so it wasn't much fun. And then if somebody's sleeping down here, you step on them all the time. And the lower bunk folds up this way into a couch, so during the day it was always a couch, but at night or whenever somebody was off watch and could sleep there, there's somebody zonked out there. But I remember we had the chief engineer officer was, I think his desk was right here, mine was right next to him, and when I first showed up I brought my golf clubs with me, and I put them up in the only place I could store them was up on the overhead pipes. And they stayed there for a long time. I had a little canvas Sunday bag, and then one day I think I was on watch, and the chief engineer was down here doing his paperwork. Well, the ship was moving quite a bit, and the golf clubs fell from the pipes and almost clubbed him in the head, so I heard about it right away. Well, I remember being a weapons officer. I remember, of course, we fired a lot of these in Vietnam. These powder casings and the shells, and we had many different kinds of shells. But loading them from when we had to get alongside a supply ship and get these over to us, it would take 4 to 8 hours sometimes alongside a ship to get all the ammunition over, and then we'd go shoot up 1,000 rounds or 1,500 rounds in 2 days, and then we'd have to come back and we'd try to save our brass or empty powder casings and send them back so they could be recycled. And then we had different kinds of shells. We had bunker busting shells, we had regular anti-personnel shells, and we had star shells that we used for night operations. We could drop, the star shell would burst in the air at maybe 1,000 feet and have a little parachute, and it would be like a phosphorus light there, burning glow over a battlefield area. And I remember that inventorying all these shells in our magazines, the star shells had the oldest dates. Some of them were from the 1930s, like 39, 36. The Navy never got rid of them after the last war. They had them as surplus. So they knew we needed them out here once in a while, so they didn't make any new ones, they just gave us the old ones. So the gunner's mates were always kind of worried about these things going to go off where they're supposed to go off, or are they going to go off in the barrel? But it was always kind of a surprise when they did work, and so we'd be watching it from maybe 1,000 yards or 2,000 yards offshore. So, well, we were so happy that they did work. But there's always and some of the other heavy shells we used had 1940s, 1950s dates on them. The Navy was getting rid of all their old ammunition and dumping it on Vietnam. The bosun mates could rig this up to take on fuel from the oiler. We could pull a huge stanchion or post about 6-7 feet high, and with a hook on it, they could run a line over, and a leader line. They'd pull a hose here and then refuel back here. And we had, of course, the refueling station forward. But this was the flight deck. The other time, we had non-skid out here, so it wasn't as slippery as it is now. And the hangar used to be right there, and we had 2 Dash helicopters. And that's one of them. And then I remember one time Captain Gooden at the time, he wanted to fly this thing day in and day out, just to get as many hours as possible. And then it was pouring rain one day, and I happened to say to him, "It's raining, Captain." And he just looked at me and said, "It's weatherproof, isn't it?" He said, "Are you?" "Yes, sir." I had to stand out here in the rain for 3 hours, flying this thing around the ship, make him happy. But that was quite an experience, too. When I drove up here, it reminded me of when I first met the Orlek in 1969. I had to fly to Bangkok, and it took me something like 27 hours to get there. Tired, and I get to Bangkok, and I'm trying to find a Navy ship, and I'm on the plane. There's only Air Force guys and Army guys. I asked everybody, "Where's the ship?" Nobody knew. So they said, "Well, you're an officer. You go down to this hotel. You'll just stay there. You get carrying all your records." And I thought, well, I got my orders say meet the ship. I said, "Where's the port?" Nobody knows where the port is. So I finally asked a cab driver about the ship. And he's grabbing my stuff, and he's putting all my stuff in his trunk. Yeah, ship, I know ship. Yeah, I take you ship. So, "Where's ship?" And I said, "Here in Bangkok." "Yeah, ship. And I get in the back of the cab, and the guy's driving through Bangkok traffic. It's just crazy. And then he leaves town. And I think, am I ever coming back alive? I don't know where this guy's going. I tried to communicate with him. I said, "The ship, Orlek." He said, "Yeah, ship." And he starts driving way out in the country past all these villages, chickens in the road and everything. And the jungle starts closing in on us, and the road's getting narrower and narrower, and there's a canopy of jungle trees over us. And I think, we're lost, I'm lost, never coming back, never even meet the ship. And he's just driving like 60 miles an hour on this dirt road. And after it seemed like 2 hours, he finally just jams on the brakes and does a little 4-wheel slide at the end of the road, and I see a river. And it's all covered with, like this, brown, but jungle all around it. And he points out, "Ship." And there's I look about 100, 200 yards away, there's the Orlek sitting in the middle of this little river, brown river in Bangkok. I go, "I found it." And there's a little pier there, and these guys have bum boats with these big Evinrude engines and long, I don't know, what are they, rods with propellers to them. And they charge you like $2 or $1 to get to the ship. And I'd be darned, I couldn't believe it. I thought the guys were taking me for a ride. And the first thing the officer on the quarterdeck asked me, he said, "How much did you pay that guy?" And I said, "I think I paid him $2." He said, "You got screwed. Welcome to Bangkok."